We are following breaking news regarding a significant federal raid in the Twin Cities. Details are still emerging, but we can confirm major
At 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Director of Homeland Security stepped to the podium in Washington, D.C. and delivered a statement that would shake the nation to its core. Today, federal law enforcement has dismantled what we believe to be the most sophisticated human trafficking and financial fraud network ever discovered operating under political protection on American soil. Minneapolis, Minnesota. $75 million, 120 children, and a sitting state senator accused of building an empire not on legislation, but on exploitation, smuggling, and silence. This is not a story about drugs. This is a story about power disguised as public service, and what happens when the system itself becomes the fortress. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about political corruption in America. And I promise you, the deeper we go, the worse it gets. 4:32 a.m., South Minneapolis, Minnesota. The streets were dead quiet. Freezing February fog hung low over the industrial district near the river, wrapping warehouses and abandoned factories in a blanket of gray. Streetlights flickered against the frost. The only sound was the distant hum of semi-trucks on Interstate 35. Then the convoy rolled in. 32 black SUVs. No lights. No sirens. Moving in perfect formation like shadows cutting through the pre-dawn dark. FBI, ICE, U.S. Marshals, ATF, Minnesota State Patrol SWAT, over 200 federal agents coordinated across 6 strike teams, descending on a network of locations simultaneously across the Twin Cities metro area. The primary target, a sprawling 3-story compound in South Minneapolis surrounded by 12-foot reinforced fencing, security cameras on every corner, and steel reinforced doors that looked more like a military installation than a residential property. Locals called it the Senator's Fortress. Federal agents called it Ground Zero. At exactly 4:34 a.m., the first breaching charge detonated. The front gate blew inward with a deafening crack. Flashbangs erupted in rapid succession, lighting up the fog like lightning. SWAT teams in black tactical gear poured through the opening, rifles raised, night vision down, moving room to room with surgical precision. Federal agents, hands up. Get down now. Inside. Chaos. Men scrambled through hallways. Women screamed. Children huddled in corners, wide-eyed and trembling. Agents found them everywhere, locked in basement rooms, sleeping on floors with no beds, crammed into storage spaces barely big enough to stand. 120 children. Ages 4 to 17. Some had been there for months, others for years. But that wasn't the most shocking discovery. In a locked office on the 3rd floor, agents found something that changed the entire trajectory of the investigation. 18 encrypted laptops, 4 external hard drives, a wall-mounted server rack still humming with activity, and in a fireproof safe hidden behind a false panel, stacks of ledgers meticulously handwritten, documenting every transaction, every transfer, every name. This wasn't just a trafficking house, this was the command center. And the digital fingerprints led directly to Senator Khalid Osman, a 3-term Minnesota state legislator, community leader, and one of the most publicly respected voices in the Somali American community. A man who had built his career on advocating for immigrant rights, child welfare, and justice reform. A man who, according to these files, had been running a $75 million empire built on human smuggling, document fraud, and financial exploitation for over a decade. 6:18 a.m., FBI Cyber Forensics Division, Minneapolis Field Office. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of a dozen monitors displaying cascading lines of code. Analysts sat hunched over keyboards, fingers moving fast, cracking encryption layers one by one. Then the network diagram appeared. A sprawling web of shell companies, nonprofit organizations, logistics firms, and financial accounts stretching across 14 states and 6 countries. Operation name, Iron Veil. At the center of it all, Senator Khalid Osman. His digital signature was everywhere. Encrypted authorizations, wire transfer approvals, coordination emails routed through proxy servers in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. The structure was brilliant in its simplicity. On the surface, Senator Osman ran a network of community nonprofits providing refugee resettlement services, job training programs, and housing assistance for newly arrived immigrants. Legitimate. Funded by state grants, federal aid, and private donations. But underneath, the operation functioned as a sophisticated smuggling and exploitation pipeline. Families desperate to enter the United States would pay smugglers overseas, sometimes $10,000, $20,000, even $50,000 per person. Those smugglers had direct ties to Osman's network. Once families arrived, they were funneled into resettlement programs controlled by his shell companies, but instead of receiving the help they were promised, they were trapped. Forced to work in cash-only businesses. Their documents held hostage. Their wages withheld. Threatened with deportation if they spoke out. Children were separated from parents and placed in group homes that existed only on paper. The state sent funding for their care, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, but the children received almost nothing. The money vanished into offshore accounts registered under ghost corporations in Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming. Senator Osman didn't just exploit the system. He redesigned it. He sat on state legislative committees overseeing refugee services. He helped write the policies that determined which organizations received funding. He used his political influence to shield his network from audits, inspections, and investigations. This was not corruption. This was command-level collusion. And it had been operating in plain sight, protected by the armor of public trust and political immunity for more than 10 years. One forensic analyst stared at the screen, his face pale. This isn't just one guy. This is an entire parallel system. He built a shadow government inside the real one. The lead investigator nodded slowly. Then we tear it down. Every piece, every name, and this was only the beginning. 7:45 a.m., Joint Operations Command Center, Federal Building, downtown Minneapolis. The room was packed. Agents from every major federal agency stood shoulder to shoulder in front of a massive digital map projected across the wall. Dozens of red markers pulsed across the Twin Cities, each one representing a location tied to Operation Iron Veil. Warehouses, apartment complexes, daycare centers, restaurants, shipping facilities, even a small charter school. All connected, all controlled, all part of the empire. The operation commander, a 26-year veteran of the FBI, stood at the front, arms crossed, voice steady. We hit them everywhere, all at once. No warning, no leaks. We move fast, we move clean, and we take it all down before the sun sets. The numbers were staggering. Over 1,000 federal agents deployed across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota. 72 SWAT teams, 18 Black Hawk helicopters, armored tactical units, K-9 teams, mobile forensic labs, even U.S. Marshals on standby for high-risk apprehensions. This wasn't just a raid. This was a full-scale eradication operation. At 8 a.m. sharp, the order was given. Execute. Across the state, strike teams moved simultaneously. In St. Paul, agents stormed a shipping warehouse near the rail yards. Inside, they found falsified customs documents, crates of counterfeit identification cards, and detailed logs of smuggling routes running from the southern border through Texas, up through the Midwest, and into Minnesota. In Bloomington, a luxury apartment complex was raided. 4 floors, 32 units, all rented under fake names tied to Osman's network. Agents found families living 8, 10, 12 to a unit, working 18-hour shifts in nearby factories, their paychecks seized by landlords who never actually owned the property. In Rochester, a daycare center that received over $200,000 per year in state funding was shut down. Investigators found only 6 children on site. The rest existed only in falsified enrollment records. The funding had been diverted into personal accounts. And in Duluth, near the Canadian border, agents discovered a small trucking company that had been moving humanitarian supplies across state lines for years. But the manifests didn't match the cargo. Hidden compartments in trailers revealed bundles of forged documents, birth certificates, social security cards, work permits ready for distribution. Everywhere they looked, they found the same pattern: exploitation disguised as charity, smuggling disguised as resettlement, fraud disguised as public service. By 2 p.m., federal agents had seized over $18 million in cash, frozen 73 bank accounts, shut down 41 businesses, and arrested 62 individuals tied to the network. Among them, 3 city council members, a county judge, 2 state legislative aides, and a senior official in Minnesota's Department of Human Services. But the biggest prize was still out there: Senator Khalid Osman. 3:47 p.m., Edina, Minnesota. A quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. Expensive homes. Manicured lawns. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. Federal agents surrounded a 2-story colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac, Senator Osman's personal residence. He didn't run. He didn't resist. When agents knocked, he opened the door calmly, hands raised, dressed in a tailored suit as if he'd been expecting them. "I have nothing to hide," he said, his voice steady, his expression unreadable. But inside his home office, agents found everything. Encrypted phones, offshore account statements, handwritten notes detailing payoffs to officials, schedules for smuggling operations, and contingency plans in case of federal investigation. And in a locked drawer beneath his desk, a single USB drive. When analysts cracked it open hours later, they found the final piece of the puzzle. A master file labeled Phase 3, Expansion Protocol. It outlined a plan to replicate the Minnesota operation across 6 other states: Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts, using the same structure, the same shell companies, the same exploitation tactics, all coordinated through a central network controlled by Senator Osman and a small circle of political allies. The goal was simple: build a nationwide infrastructure where immigrants could be funneled into exploitative labor systems, stripped of their rights, and turned into a permanent underclass that generated billions in profit while remaining invisible to the public. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. This was about turning vulnerable people into commodities and turning the immigration system into a machine designed to harvest them. One investigator read through the file, his hands shaking. He wasn't just running a trafficking network. He was trying to institutionalize it. The room went silent, because they all understood what that meant. If this had gone undetected for another year, another 2 years, it might have become too large to stop. It might have become the system. 8:32 p.m., FBI interrogation room, Minneapolis field office. Senator Khalid Osman sat across from 2 federal agents, his hands cuffed, his face calm. He didn't deny anything. He didn't lawyer up immediately. Instead, he leaned forward and spoke with the same measured tone he'd used in 100 legislative hearings. "You think you're stopping something," he said quietly. "But you're not. You're just revealing how broken the system already is. People come to this country desperate. They have nothing. No money, no papers, no protection. And the system doesn't care. It pushes them into the shadows and then it punishes them for being there. I gave them a way in. I gave them work. I gave them a roof. Yes, I profited. But they were surviving. Without me, they'd be dead or deported. One of the agents leaned back, his jaw tight. You locked children in basements. You stole their wages. You trafficked human beings for profit. Osman didn't flinch. I did what the system was already doing. I just did it more efficiently. That was the moment the agents realized something chilling. He believed it. He genuinely believed he was the solution, not the problem. That he had simply optimized a system that was already built to exploit. And in some dark, twisted way, he wasn't entirely wrong. Because the conditions that allowed his empire to flourish weren't created by him. They were created by decades of policy failures, enforcement gaps, and political indifference. He just learned how to profit from them. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Within 72 hours, the governor of Minnesota announced a full audit of every state-funded refugee resettlement program. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed over 200 federal charges, including human trafficking, wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. The Department of Justice launched a task force to investigate similar networks in other states, and the 120 children rescued from the fortress were placed into protective custody, with federal social workers working around the clock to reunite them with family members or find safe placements. But the damage was done. Families had been torn apart, lives had been destroyed. Trust in the system, already fragile, had been shattered. And across the country, people were asking the same question. How did this happen? How did a sitting state senator, a man elected to protect people, become the architect of their exploitation? The answer is uncomfortable, because it's not just about one man. It's about a system that creates so many shadows, so many gaps, so many places where vulnerable people can disappear that predators don't have to work hard to find them. They just have to be patient. They just have to wait. And when the moment is right, they step in, not as criminals, but as saviors. That's the most dangerous kind of corruption. The kind that wears a suit, the kind that smiles for cameras, the kind that gets elected. Power doesn't always need violence. Sometimes it just needs silence and ambition. And a system too broken to notice the difference between help and harm. This story is a warning, not about one senator, not about one city, but about what happens when we stop paying attention, when we stop asking questions, when we let trust replace accountability. Because the fortress wasn't just a building in South Minneapolis, it was a mindset, a belief that some people are too respected, too important, too necessary to be challenged. And that mindset is what allows empires like this to grow in the first place. Senator Khalid Osman is awaiting trial. 73 individuals connected to Operation Iron Veil are in federal custody. The investigation is ongoing, but the 120 children are safe. And that's what matters most. If you're still watching this, tap the like button so more people see this story. Comment expose if you believe corruption like this should be dragged into the light, no matter who's involved. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the only way we stop the next fortress from being built is by refusing to look away from the ones that already exist. Stay vigilant. Stay informed. And never stop demanding accountability. Thank you for watching.